and welcome to the EO Wonder Podcast. I'm your host, Kalika Yap, and today we have an incredible guest who's a master at building enterprise value, scaling businesses, and creating unforgettable first impressions. Joining us is David Aferiat, the founder of Avid Vines, a company that imports the highest quality certified organic champagnes and wines. David's not only a champion of organic champagne, but also an expert in driving business growth and customer loyalty. He's helped fintech companies scale to incredible heights, growing one company from 0 to 14 million, and he now serves as an advisor to tech firms and institutions evaluating next-gen fintech. David's leadership journey has taken him through EO Atlanta, where he's led as president under the theme of a hero's journey. And beyond business, David is passionate about wellness, balance, and perseverance. And today we're going to dive into how those values shape his work and his life. We'll also explore some fun champagne myth busting and how a great wellness routine can be rewarded with a glass of organic bubbly. So let's get started. David, welcome to the show.
Alika, thank you so much. It is a delight to be with you and to be here.
Well, I would love to give the audience a little bit of backdrop because, when I reached out to you, the reason why I reached out to you was because my daughter was considering going to Emory University and being the president of EO Los Angeles and meeting with another fellow president of EO Atlanta. It was really nice to make that connection. Didn't you think?
That's the power of EO, really. It's an ability to instantly have a kind of circle of trust and to be able to help in any way possible. So that's why we're here in this organization, to really connect and then to grow. I don't know how many of your audience knows about EO, but it's the peer organization that we all invest our time in and do so because it brings us things and perspectives from people who we may not otherwise be able to share the highs and lows of running a business, such as business partners or a spouse or even employees.
Well, the fact that, you're such an incredible and busy entrepreneur, and to be able to just actually text me and let's go to the farmer's market, and then when I was there recently, you took me to this, really happening hotel on the 4th, which is right, where do you get the attention unless you've already built, this camaraderie that we have in EO?
For sure. And it's all about the experiences of life. And EO certainly gives you this permission to do things and challenge yourself. And frankly, even if it weren't EO, it's if I had to write on my shirt, one of my affirmations is I am courageous. And so I know, and at times in my life, this isn't always on, right? There are times in our lives where we dip and we're not as courageous. But I know when I'm statistically beyond where I should be, and how do I revert back to the mean? How do I get back to where I normally am? It's usually by putting myself into challenging spaces so that they produce growth. And goodness, whether it's going to a new restaurant, whether it's picking a new wine on a wine list I haven't tried in front of others, whether it's savoring a bottle of champagne or frankly, whether it's organizing over the last 18 months, this amazing global learning conference that we call NERV for the East that wound up bringing EO members from around the world, from South Africa and Germany to Atlanta to connect and grow together with a slate of speakers, a 3-day conference that had $1 million budget and a committee of about 20 amazing souls who were also volunteering their time away from families, their business, in order to contribute to something greater than themselves and greater than me, but toward this theme of, you said it, that the name of the conference was called Perseverance. That was a challenging space to be in.
Yeah. Well, I'd love for people to learn more about your origin story. You are a Francophile and you started Avid Vines. Tell us a little bit about how you got there.
Yeah. So I grew up most of my life with a portion of my family who live in France and who I interacted with on a regular basis. And it drove me to want to speak the language so that I could connect with them even at a deeper level. And it started with my grandparents. my father came to this country when he was about 14 and to Long Island from Syosset, Long Island, no check. And he came from what was then a French colony, a piece of France in North Africa, in Algeria specifically, and in a town called Oran. And so when revolution happened in the late 50s, they were bombing businesses and buildings, on the streets. And my grandfather he was a grossiste, he was a wholesaler, and he would supply the open air markets and shooks that people would sell everything from household items, from like hosiery to socks to toothpaste and cleaners and such. And this warehouse where people would buy wholesale and then sell to the public. Family lived on the roof, not on the roof, but on the floors above the the enterprise. And what my grandfather had to leave cash in the register, inventory on the shelves, because they were bombing buildings, and he had to leave. And so half the family was already in the process of moving to Nice, right across the Mediterranean in France to Nice. But my grandfather said, I'm going to follow my brother and go to New York. And so that's where he took my father and his 3 other siblings. And years later, he met my mother, and then voilà, here I am. And so as I said, I would spend time sometimes growing up with cousins who could speak French around a table where my great-grandmother was, my grandparents were, and I loved these family reunions, and it would drive me nuts that I couldn't speak the language. And I'd look at my dad and be like, what's the deal? He's like, well, listen, I don't have time. I'm trying to, supporting this family. If you want to learn French, go off and do it. Okay, great. So that spoke to me. And the happiest times I've ever seen my father was when he was reunited with his cousins from France. And so I've always had this theme in connecting these two cultures together. I was at a time when I was growing this other previous venture of the fintech software company, that I was also the president of the French American Chamber of Commerce. And so it started to make sense in my life that I kept coming back to this. And when I was growing that fintech company, we took no outside capital. We bootstrapped it from 0 to 14 million. And in the beginning, we didn't pay ourselves. And so in that first year or so, I would work on the software and business development in the mornings. And in the afternoon, I found a job at a friend of mine who owned a tapas Spanish restaurant. Was like, you know a lot about wine. You should work for this wine distributor. They just do wine. They don't do alcohol, or they don't do hard spirits and such. And so I got the job, and it was like, this is fun. And so I would do in the afternoons what people would spend all day doing. And that was just getting with accounts, helping them form their wine lists, showing a beautiful book of a wine from all over the world, including France, but all over the world. And it was great. I got these two worlds going. And then I eventually, after about a year and a half or so, gave up the just working for this local distributor with this wine, grew the fintech company, but always kind of came back to, this was always a kind of fun experience. And I don't want to be the distributor. It's too capital intensive, but the importer surely seemed like a good spot. And, a winery is very dicey, very risky, and very also capital intensive. But I came back to Avid because I, one, love champagne, and two, started getting headaches from drinking what is mass produced and mass marketed to us. And I was like, I love this too much not to dig deeper and say, why am I getting the headaches, that I'm getting? And during a visit in 2018, we went to one of these smaller owner growers who never purchase a grape. They touch every one of their own grapes to make the champagne, and they do it certified and organic. And it just was champagne unveiled. And I was with my parents, and I checked with their palate and mine. I'm like, this stuff is heavenly. And when I asked the young producer, do you export to the US? He said no. I was like, we're going to fill out a little form here on the back of this cocktail napkin. And if you give me the exclusive rights to sell this in the US, I will build a company around it. And lo and behold, that's exactly what we did. And now we're gaining more producers and expanding the portfolio to just those people that want to drink really, really good stuff that frankly, you won't know their names. But if you do go to Champagne and if you go visit France and you follow an itinerary that I give you, you'll fall in love with them like I did. That's for sure.
So is that one of the myths that champagne gives you headaches?
Well, yeah, I think the in terms of that's one of the myths. There's a couple of others. I would put that like we're going to start in reverse order. But one of the myths is that yeah, there's more to drinking what's at the après ski or at the end of the wine store aisle, with the labels that we all know. And it's just because it's out of convenience. You and I and everybody will live happy lives without ever optimizing a champagne purchase, right? But if you scratch a little bit past what is obvious and right at your fingertips in terms of what's at the store, you can discover a whole different world that frankly tastes so much better than what we're accustomed to drinking. And so, yes, owner grower is a great term to know because the more and more are making it to the US, but they're just in small, it's like collecting baseball cards, or it's like getting that extra. I know people who really love the champagne, for instance, who collect watches. And they once you're past the Rolex and Patek Philippe and all the name brands, you really start getting into these esoteric small production wine, watchmakers from like the Swiss Alps and such. And I draw a parallel to that. It's like if you're beyond drinking for the Joneses, to impress the Joneses, you get to a state where I drink this because it's so good. And I don't care if people know about it or not. I would like for you to try this. And I serve this with my food or at my table so you can enjoy it. That gets to a level of, well, generosity. And that's where I like to operate for sure. It's just try this, you'll love it.
Right. So are there any more myths that you want to share?
Sure. So other myths there are plenty. As it relates to champagne, one of them is don't, please don't mix Premier Cru organic champagne of the like that I bring into this country. Don't mix it with orange juice and turn it into a mimosa. So, right, just don't do that. Here's what you do instead. And actually, one of our chefs during COVID, we had virtual tastings, and I would bring on. I had like music. It was a whole hour of music and sommeliers and chefs. And so one of the chefs from Dallas, Adrian Nieto, I had this did this amazing. It's on our website somewhere, but it's an amazing recipe for this is how you should do a mimosa with this kind of champagne. You're going to need 3 glasses. One, you're going to pour this Premier Cru beautiful champagne. Think. In the other one, whip up your own concoction. It may not even be orange juice, but take pineapple and papaya, for instance, and just blend it up into a swirl in a blender, and then add some club soda and let that be the effervescence that you want. And then your third glass is just water to stay hydrated. So when you're having your brunch, yes, it's a little complicated, not even complicated, but yes, it's a little bit more glassware. But you have your glass of champagne, you'll sip, it's great. And I'll talk about some pairings in a moment, but then you can have your mimosa, which is the effervescence of the club soda and the juice that we're all looking for. And then if you need to, you can cleanse your palate with water and then repeat, 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 repeat.
So does a club soda, can that also have a fruity flavor if they want like orange juice or something?
Sure, exactly. So, like any of these, flavored club sodas, but add some real juice to it. And it doesn't take much. A little bit goes a long way, if you are if you're entertaining, but for sure, absolutely. So make
Awesome.
that your sparkly, and then enjoy the champagne for what it is.
Right, good. So I know that one of the topics that when we met in person a couple of weeks ago was talking about perseverance, which was the theme of Nerve. Tell us a little bit about what perseverance is. A lot of people have their different definitions of it. People think of it as tenacity or resilience. Like, what is your definition of perseverance and how has that changed your work and your life?
It's such a great question you're asking. And I can honestly tell you that 24 hours ago, or I should say maybe Friday of last week, the conference ended on Thursday, and Friday I was spent like after 18 months, like trying to decompress. Over the weekend we did a charity walk to raise money to feed to feed the hungry. And a lot on those, it was like a 10-mile walk. And so a lot just kind of sunk into place. The definition of perseverance that we used for this conference to inspire was, the conference was perseverance, your purpose, your power. And we defined perseverance as being the daily commitment to a purpose greater than yourselves, pursued with grit and passion. And it's those two things. What is your purpose? What's your vision or goal for your future self that in fact serves something larger than yourself, that has an impact on the world? What is that purpose or vision that in the role you play that you want your future self to achieve? That's one part of it. And then the second part is, what is that daily commitment that you're going to do every day to get to that point? That's the perseverance. That's the perseverance. So whatever that purpose is, it should power what your daily commitment that you do every day, that's part of your routine, to get you there. And so when I served as the chapter it's been about 2.5 to 3 years of service to EO as the president-elect to my chapter, building the theme that I led 150 entrepreneurs through under a hero's journey. And then immediately stepping off of that and into this role to create for the 1,800 people, only about, 500 were at this conference, but there's 1,800 people in the region who suddenly knew about Nerve and beyond. And we were able to bring 500 of them who were willing to pay to and spend the 3 days of connecting and growing under the theme of perseverance. That it really started to connect for me all of the activities that I've been doing and that I now will do going forward. And that means the consulting, that means sharing these beautiful champagnes with the world. And that also means starting a venture where I use the hero's journey framework and the theme of perseverance to define our purpose, which is the two combined as a resiliency framework, to do coaching and to even create a workshop in conjunction with another EO member who is as inspired as I was by a hero's journey and what we've been doing over the last, what this conference was about, to go out into the world and to talk to and to help people when change happens, whether by their design or forced on them. How can we use this resiliency framework of a hero's journey and perseverance to pivot to growth and get back to what are the hacks to get to a daily commitment? And it just so happens that if you do this daily commitment as your routine, that means, like, how do we all sleep better? How do we all wake up and, go through our affirmations, go through some, gratitude journaling? There's more to that. But if we have healthy routines like that, why then, goodness, organic champagne can be your reward, because it's not going to give you the headache the next day. It's not going to interrupt that routine. Doing these things and having an attitude of self-care as you go through this daily commitment serves you better, serves you as the machine, to get to that finish line and to meet your future self in a better state. You said it before, like tenacity and resilience is part of perseverance. But I think a lot of people also have this idea that perseverance is, crawling to the finish line and exhausted from the effort and from all the obstacles and the challenges. And it's like, that's the definition we wanted to change. For us, perseverance is meeting that future self stridently with confidence as a result of a clean daily commitment that leaves you invigorated for the next chapter, but just drops you off to the 3-year-old, 5-year-old version of yourself in the future and says, here are the keys. Well done. Go, girl. Go and get it. And capable of turning around and then redefining that, the next new purpose.
So how does someone find their purpose?
Well, I have a mentor, and that's the great Warren Rustin, who talked to me about when my family was much younger. It gives me chills just talking about it, but purpose comes from what your core values are. Your core values come from what your beliefs are. if you roll from your core values and beliefs, they affect your daily thoughts. Those thoughts affect your emotions, and then they affect what your actions are and your results. A lot of people will cycle through action and result. I know. I mean, I have. Sometimes I'm trying to grow Avid, and I fail every day at it. But I fail in sometimes a way that's frustrating because I'm either not learning or I'm repeating, or I'm saying to myself, okay, well, fine, we'll change the action. Maybe I'll get a different result. When in fact, I need to go back further and say, no, I need to get back to some beliefs here so that my thoughts change and my emotions change, so that leads me to a different action and then a different result. Right. So I might be really frustrated by the lack of response to some, cold call or cold emails. And then I need to go back and say, well, fine. If I'm frustrated, how do I change my frustration? Well, what's my thought behind that? This should work. What's my belief? Maybe I go back to like, look, if you win over the people, if you make it about the relationship, you'll always win. Okay. So that puts me more into an expansive, abundant state of thoughts and generosity. And then my thoughts and emotions start to lead to, okay, how can I give value either in these emails, or why don't I just show up in person if I need to? And then that is a different act that creates a different result. So when you talk about purpose, I say, I go back to the core values. And Warren was exceptionally good at not only helping me define what the core values were, but then on a ride from Atlanta to Rosemary Beach, the panhandle of Florida, which is like a 5-hour road trip with my children, young children at the time, all the toys and all the stuff were like put away, and I had a captive audience. And there's nothing that a father or a parent really loves than having a child for like captive audience for 5 hours. And like, folks, we're going to take this really slow, but we're going to go through this. What? And this was like during the Game of Thrones and stuff. I'm like, if we were a army marching on the field and had some bannersmen and had a flag at the top to announce who we were on the field of battle, what would be emblazoned on that flag? What's our family crest? And let that kind of inform what our core values are. And I think my kids were 5 and 8 maybe at the time. And so it's like, I'm not going to say a word, but this is what the conversation is going to be. We're not counting what color the cars are. This is what we're going to talk about. And so slowly but surely, and it took nearly 2.5 hours to get through it, but we came up with an amazing, images that represent who we are as a family. Do you want to know what they are real quick?
Absolutely.
So these 4 were, the first was an open book, this idea of a thirst for learning. Always be the student, always have this thirst for learning. It will serve you well. An importance on an education, importance on doing well to learn. Check. One of my daughters was like, we have, in our practice of Judaism, there's a concept called tikkun olam, which is like to repair the tiny cracks in the world, just make it a slightly better place than where you found it. And so we have this globe as the other image, and it's this idea of service, and it's this idea of also travel, which we love to do, that fits nicely with our values. The other 2 were a fork and a knife, which is what I kind of threw in, which is a fork and a knife is a symbol of generosity. It's also, we love to cook, and food is a very important, a way that we bring our family together, and that we also, how we welcome a stranger, in our midst, whether we're entertaining with friends or whether we invite someone new to come to our house. That's from that fork and knife flows this value of generosity and how we treat the stranger. And then the last one was my youngest at the time, and she said, I can't remember the words that she used, but she was like, the symbol, Daddy, for me is a curlicue, something crazy. And I was like, okay, let's take yes and that a little bit. So our curlicue, we got to like, well, curlicue represents creativity. It represents the boundary that sparks the creativity. There's nothing worse than just a blank sheet of paper, for a writer's block. or the blank canvas for an artist to go, what am I going to do? But the moment you say you can't use the color black, or you can't use the letter E if you're going to write this poem, suddenly the creativity just from the constraint starts to burst. And so this curlicue was this: we are people, we are a family who sees obstacles and knows how to go around them.
That's beautiful. So we have learning, we have service, we have generosity, and we have creativity with obstacles. That is so wonderful.
Yeah,
Mine core values spell out the word charm. Change the world, have heart, all in, be remarkable, and make lemonade out of lemon. So the last one is kind of similar to yours, like
for
creativity
sure.
with obstacles.
For
And so
sure.
once you have your values, how does that then help you with finding your purpose?
It's a filter. Helps you weed out what I shouldn't be doing. It helps you tune in to this mind and body connection. Where am I feeling when I'm doing something that's right? Well, I feel it in my heart. I feel it, just above just below the clavicle, where I like that feeling. It kind of goes to my toes. That's great. As a filter, when I'm doing something that isn't right, where do I feel that? In the pit of my stomach. I feel it like behind my shoulder blade. I mean, these are physiological things where you just know that as you're on the journey of life, those things resonate, and you're either doing something right to put you on the path, or you're veering off. You're statistically deviating from that path. You need to revert back to the mean. You need to revert back to your journey. And by the way, I want to make one other note. Like, in talking about this, a hero's journey is a storybook concept. It's well known. Joseph Conrad, talks about it, and we see it in every film and really cultural piece of art, whether it's music or the like. I have learned not to put either myself or you in that role of the hero. And what the real hero is: understanding. It's something created between you and others on the journey or toward a purpose. And whether you have a guide or a mentor to help you along the way, the hero should be, what you're protecting is this understanding. If we can all, it's a concept I'm still wrestling with, but we seek understanding so that we can have a relationship to build off of, and not so much the person in the story, which seems individualistic. It is really about, you just cannot go through this life alone.
Yeah, so The Hero's Journey was actually one of the books by Joseph Campbell that George Lucas based all his Star Wars trilogies based on, which is really phenomenal, right? Because a lot of times, right now we are it's so easy for us to get like a business coach, but back then, like you couldn't get an entrepreneur coach or a business coach. And so you would get all this learning and this wisdom from fantastic authors like Joseph Campbell, because yeah, he taught a lot of people. And now with George Lucas's films, like it's so amazing where people can get really inspired by that.
Exactly. And so, yeah, we've created this nine-step framework. It's 9 steps, 3 acts. Each act has 3 scenes in it, and it's 9 scenes, or it's 9 steps. Each step is a scene under 3 acts. And I think the original model is maybe 11 steps. We've condensed it, and it goes about trying to describe when you're stuck, when change happens, where can you find your allies? What tools, or what's the lightsaber or utility belt that's part of that process of figuring out what the next step is? And in doing so, you've got to have some kind of purpose defined that says, okay, this change has happened. Processing it, going through this zone again of, what are my core beliefs? How are they going to influence what my thoughts are, what my emotions are, and then what my actions and results that I expect to be. Purpose drives all of that, puts me on the path, and then I have to figure out, using methodologies from the books that we read, from the speakers that we listen to, from the conferences we attend, how can I bring this into my world, wrestle with them, with someone else, a guide, and pivot to growth. And in the end, I can talk about the methodology and frankly give it away. But part of the process is this accountability that we walk with, to get to this understanding, to get to an understanding of what our purpose is, where we're headed, goodness, where we're going.
So, what are some of your daily disciplines? Share with us, share that with the audience, how you keep on purpose.
So I'll share what it is, how I've committed to it, and when I don't commit to it, what happens. It's pretty simple. I gave a little bit, I described a little bit of it, but it comes from a great friend and a mentor, a guide of mine. His name is Ethan King, and he has this wonderful acronym called GAMER. It's like, are you a gamer? And what that means is the G stands for gratitude, and journaling that gratitude. The A stands for affirmations. What positive language are we saying to ourselves, usually at the beginning of the day, to give ourselves fortify the grace that we want to give ourselves when things go wrong, or when small mistakes are made, or big mistakes. What are those affirmations? Also kind of journal. And then the M stands for meditation, a period where I usually infuse it with. So again, my morning routine is finish the gamer first. So meditation, exercise, and then rest in the evening, rest and/or reading. So a good morning routine starts the night before. Have I gotten to bed at a reasonable hour, like around 11:30, possibly on a good day, maybe even 11? Am I reading? The phone for me is not in my bedroom at all. My wife has it. She has the discipline to put it down and not doom scroll. Before I developed some of these routines, I was in a bad spot where I was doom scrolling and I'm like, why am I wasting so much time? But it's terrible. So for me, the phone is just not in the room. I use an old-fashioned alarm clock, and that helps. So I read before I go to bed, one page. I'll make the progress, and that's how I get through a book. Morning, I wake up, go and do, get the exercise done first, and then I come out of it with my gratitude journaling and affirmations. I will also do the meditation, and this is before really sitting down and having something to eat. The meditation comes from music from an amazing person called Jason Campbell. You can find him on Spotify, and he uses a lot of, he's a prolific record producer. I think last year he produced an album a month, and it's got Eastern notes, cultural touchstones to it. So, and every 4 counts there's a bell, and that helps with the breathing. So we do like box breathing together. And in the beginning, you actually take out more breath than you take in, to just kind of exhale. Two counts of 4, and the last 4 breaths then you breathe in 1 for one count of 4, breathe out for 2. And then there's a period where you go equal amounts in, perhaps 2 counts in, 2 counts out. And then you finish the exercise with more in breath than you do out. So 2 counts of 4 in, 1 count of 4 out. And it's kind of like that box or breathing. And it's helpful. It calms the mind, prepares, opens up the mind. If the exercise hasn't helped, hasn't done that already, for me, that can be like a yoga on some days, Peloton on others, and I do like a soccer
Pilates
workout.
on some.
I do Pilates, yes, that is also part of the routine, just to mix it up, and
stretching, right?
Hmm?
Yeah, because you need to stretch your muscles.
So then what happens? Like, okay, great routine, that's fantastic, Dave. Yeah. And then I said to myself, well, in the past, for the month of September, we're at the 20, for this month, like how I'd say I've been on that routine half the time. Well, gee, why half? I'd say because all last week I was even looking at my Peloton, results. It's like there's a huge gap where from really Monday to Friday, I was out. I was in a hotel. Even though it was here in Atlanta, I was in a hotel. I did work out, but I didn't register it on Peloton or whatever. But frankly, I left my journal, at home, and I wasn't going to go back and get it or even write on hotel stationery. I just got away from the routine, and that's okay. if only because I didn't go back to my old status quo. I recognized I was off the path and now I need to swing back to it. And it's not, again, it's just not beating yourself up to say, come back to it 100%. I actually came back to it and it took me a couple of days to bring on the whole set of those routines or activities in my routine back on. And I would say that today was the first day I did all of them again. I think the previous day I didn't do the exercise, but I did some affirmations. So you bring it back. And once you're back, you can say, okay, this is how it's supposed to be. And then that will continue until you get thrown off. It's how you come back. It's how you revert back to your, what's the new mean? What's the new status quo?
You were saying earlier that you wanted to share what your life looks like when you forget your disciplines or your habits. What is it like?
Yeah, it comes back to that mind-body connection. It comes back to feeling it in my shoulders, feeling it, in the middle of my back. Yeah, it comes back to just not having that extra energy from the workout, frankly. That just starts to now, and then I can feel more voices, in my head that are arguing rather than like, on the same team. There's some work that I did at another retreat where I was able to take, we all have like an alter ego, or we all have other voices in our head. And I gave name in this exercise at this retreat, I gave names to those voices. I have a very risk averse voice in my head that is very conservative in terms of prudence and risk averse. And his name is Sam. And then I have another voice, which is, savor that champagne, go out and, don't even look, just leap. And his name is Marcel. That's actually my middle name. And Sam and Marcel used to argue in my head all the time, and they'd have to it'd just be like, pulling out the list of grievances and take both sides of the issue and say this and say that. But this exercise that I went through was like, imagine them sitting at a table over a glass of wine or a glass of champagne, and have each one talk to the other and say, I need you in my life because this is what I value in you. Like Marcel would say, Sam, for all the arguments, I love how you bring a bit of discipline. You ask that one extra question. And frankly, most of the times it's a good question to ask and it's rooted in data. So thank you. And Sam would say, Marcel, geez Louise, man, I wouldn't get out of the house if it weren't for you, right? And thank you for your creativity. Thank you I see how you, walk through the world, and I see how, people react to you. And, there would be none of that if I were in control. So thank you. And so the two of them can actually like hug it out. And it's strange, but ever since that exercise, I find less of my brain power, i.e. thoughts that aren't focused for the day's activities and priorities that need to get done. I don't find them pushing. I don't find any time wasted on this internal kind of debate as much anymore.
That is an amazing exercise. Did you do that with Katie Gala?
At her retreat at the Aurora Center, but it was part of Martha McSally, who's one of our speakers at NERV, I should say, retired Colonel Martha McSally, the first female pilot to lead, to be in a combat mission and to lead a squadron in combat.
That is phenomenal. I mean, I've never even thought about that, but you're absolutely right. We have all these crazy archetypes in our brain trying to talk all at once. And when you can name it, right? When they say you name it, then you can tame it. So you can tame Sam, you can tame Marcel, right? These thoughts.
For sure. And
Yeah.
it helps, it helps. We go through life, and maybe in the beginning when I was younger, they were more integrated, and they were more, I was just perhaps even with youth, just more strong-headed and bullheaded. But I find as I get older, that more of these, like, where are these voices coming from? And let's get all on the same page here, folks. Let's not
Yeah.
let's not pull in different directions.
That is amazing. So, what are
It's a
you looking
dynamic that
for?
can also be
Uh-huh.
used in teams as well, because in my, I've been within both in my leadership roles and when I was growing, this fintech company at times, you'd have to sit down and you'd have to say, okay, look, here's where I do think we're working well together. Here's where we're not. And, if we get back to what our beliefs are, and we can find a purpose, common purpose that we both agree on, well, then we're going to minimize what is pulling us apart and get back to, we've got a shared belief. So we feel the same way. Our actions should be in line with that.
What are you looking forward to?
Great question. You know, there's so much in my life that has been a success and that I want to that I step on, I should say, not step on, but I build off of in order to be in a role, where and to be in a place where I'm with you right now and able to share and connect and express. That comes off a lot of success, and it's not necessarily monetary success, but it comes from a success of having a wonderful family, having a beautiful partner in life, and these are all things I just do not take for granted. And that's, if you looked at my journaling, it would be thank goodness for my partner, my wife, Stephanie, in just in various and different ways. So what's next comes from, or what do I look forward to comes from the we could go on. I mean, I always want to talk about my kids, but that will take us into a whole other, aspect. Although there is a story about how I used this definition of perseverance to define our future self. I actually practiced this on my kids when they were young. And you've got to be very careful when you talk about the future version of your children. You've got to be very careful about the words that you use and how you introduce that concept, because in my case, it happens. And I was very fortunate with this concept I used on them. But I'm looking forward to being able to, as a result of these leadership roles and result of my experience, really help essentially coach, you know, people with a strong purpose that they've defined in their lives and just need the help in getting them.
Aren't you writing a book and also doing perhaps a TED Talk or something?
Yes. So thank you. As a result of a unique program within the Atlanta chapter, we take what we call EOX, since it's like a TED Talk, because the chapter wisely has kind of realized we have 150 members. We can pay to have outside speakers come in, but there are so many wonderful people doing amazing and accomplishing so much within our own chapter. If we just coach them up with a bit of how to give a good TED Talk, the knowledge that's inside this chapter is just extraordinary. We've already had talks on how to create your own chat GPT in your own voice and feed it with the right knowledge base to be an effective copywriter and to slay social media in a new way, to finding the right financing mix of financing for your business. It's great. My talk is scheduled in February, and it's obviously going to be on much of what we talked about, this hero's journey and the theme of perseverance, to create this resiliency framework that helps everyone define their purpose and get to understanding. That's the hero.
And a lot of
And yeah,
times we
so
hear,
that will lead, sorry, that will lead to the book, that will lead to the workshop that leads to a book.
right. So I know that you wanted to talk a little bit about some of your wines and some pairings. Do you have some wines there? I mean, not wines, champagne.
Champagne.
Yeah.
So I have empties. These are beautiful empties, but the quick download on this is again, it's a beautiful owner grower, and this happens to be an all-female team that I admire so much. I'm the father of two daughters, so girl power. And Raflin Lepitre, Perrine Raflin, and Emily Raflin are the next generation winemakers of a family that produces this champagne in a town that is like it's this little hamlet, but it's like the, you know, I don't know, I can't really describe the equivalent. It's just this, it's an amazing town in the region of Champagne, a region that's called the Montagne de Reims, which is an hour east of Paris by train. And it takes 15 minutes once you're in the Reims center to get to this little vineyard where Perrine makes this champagne. And so the
You
things to
have to
note,
look at the camera. Sorry.
sorry, yeah. So yeah,
So
it
you can do
says
that again.
it so you go from Reims to Chigny-les-Roses, 15-minute, little car ride, and you arrive where Perrine and Emily make this beautiful champagne. The town here is called Chigny-les-Roses, but on the label it says Premier Cru. So you've got Champagne, Premier Cru, and Grand Cru. And this is Premier Cru. On the back, this is a label that's not the label that's going to exist in the US. It's hard to read, and it's not worth reading, but on it will say the fact that it's got the audited from the organization that certifies sustainable and organic production methods. That stamp will be on here. The other stamp will be owner grower. And then another stamp will be the one that I designed for the label, which is held at 57 degrees or 13 degrees Celsius, 57 Fahrenheit, throughout its importation into the US. And like I said, when you go, I'll tell you real quickly the best way to go to Champagne, right? You land in Paris, you can take a day trip in and out, or you can spend the night in Champagne region, which is the way to do it. You take that train for an hour, you rent a car, you check into either, you can go high road and like there's beautiful resorts called the Royale. You can go the foodie route, which is another beautiful resort called Les Crières. Or you can do, and which is what I did this last time. I've been to both places. That's the last time I tried a new place, tiny homes built on stilts right in the vineyard that overlook the vineyard. And so every inch of the tiny home is well designed, everything. And when you open up the shades and the curtains, just boom, champagne, and then you're in the vineyard. It's absolutely stunning. And you can walk to this Michelin-starred restaurant called Couvert de Vigne, which is right next to, in Chigny-les-Roses, next to the city hall. And you obviously, from there, you go to the big house. Go to a big house. Go to Veuve or Taittinger or Moet, because A, they speak English very well. B, they've got like a Disneyland kind of way of explaining how champagne is made. And you're like, this is great. And you want to know how champagne is made. You want to know the whole process. And they're exceptional at explaining it to you. And it's a big house. If you're going to do anything in life that's an experience, you can't have an experience without discovery. And the best way to take people through a discovery moment, experience, is to anchor them in the familiar and then move them to the unfamiliar. This is another part of like the change kind of resiliency framework, especially if you are managing that change. You've got to start in what's familiar, then you move people to the unfamiliar. So you go to the big house so you can understand, like, I know I've had Taittinger before, or Lanson. I know these champagnes. Okay, great. They explain it to me. I absorb it. I understand it. Now move to the unfamiliar. So then from the big house, I give you the directions, and you look up Raffinage de Pitre, and you make an appointment, because it's never nice to show up at somebody's house where they're making the champagne unannounced. And you say, in English, they understand enough English. And although their English isn't as good, suddenly when bottles of champagne get opened and you're tasting, everyone starts to speak and understand each other. You get to the hero, you get to the understanding very, very easily. And now you've understood how champagne is made. You don't need to ask as many questions. You're just able to hear a little bit of their story, drink a little bit of their champagne, and go, oh my goodness, how come I can't find this in the US? Well, you can, you come back, and then you order the champagne.
Amazing. So who are your target audiences like for Avid Vines?
Yeah, so this is the fun part of the business, right? The traditional way of selling wine in the US is to sell it to a distributor, because there's a mandated 3 or sometimes 2-tier state regulation that date back to prohibition. which says that I cannot sell it directly to a consumer. I have to go through a distributor. The distributor then sells it to a retail store or a restaurant, and then they sell it to you. Okay. That's the worst way to go about this business, and one that I've had to acknowledge. And I spend we spend a little bit of time, as little as we can, in that realm, because it means shelf tags, and it means getting on restaurants by the glass, and it means getting on their menus. But it's very hard because no one's ever heard of the champagne. So it takes a lot of education, which is impossible to do through the walls of two organizations, right? The distributor, the wine store, restaurant, and then to the consumer. When you walk which is why if you walk into a wine shop, and even if there is somebody to help you, if there is, that's where we excel. If I'm on an email list for a wine store, great. But if I'm not, and I'm just on a shelf, I start to look like every other champagne. Maybe there's a shelf tag, maybe there isn't. And so you're left with, like, I don't know how to make a decision. I'm just going to go with what I know, the familiar, or I'm going to go, frankly, buy the cheapest one I can see here. Terrible ways to buy and educate yourself, but that's all right. Instead, we try to solve the problem by selling the wine through our website. And you can come to avidvines.com. You can order the champagne, and from anywhere in the US, whether you're in California or you're in Kennebunkport, we can send you the champagne and it arrives at your door. And so I can sell to any individual address, but I can't sell. If I want to sell to a store in another state, I have to work through a distributor.
Got it.
So
So your target audience is direct to consumer, those people who do not want headaches after they drink champagne.
yeah, and we have a specific persona. I don't want to mention, but we definitely dial in when we're talking, like who we have in mind. But again, it is for people who have a curated wellness routine, a self-care routine that they know on a Sunday what the rest of the week looks like me. I mean, I know every day of the week what days I'm not working out, that are rest, what days I am working out, and what classes are they. And for everyone else, like if you've got a hair appointment or a hydrofacial, you understand these things and you do these things because you're invested in how you take care of yourself. To those, we deliver these champagnes that will not slow you down, that will not alter that routine. We have all spent the next day sometimes. And by the way, I'm not responsible. When I say there's no headaches with these, you can buy a bottle. If you get a headache, you let me know. We'll cheerfully send you your money back for the bottle. I'm not responsible for what you drink after the champagne, of course. But if the simple rule is, if you open up the bottle, you share it with at least one other person, and you have food with it, you will not get a headache. And, unless you're like me, if you drink champagne alone, you're kind of a sociopath. But I guess I am too, because, you got to be a little, champagne is meant to be shared. It's meant to be shared.
Yeah, it's usually that celebratory spirit, that you want to celebrate with champagne.
We say a lot, what that leads to sometimes the behavior of, oh, I want to save this for a real special occasion. Well, that's great. Sometimes the occasion passes you by. Sometimes, you miss it. And life shouldn't be lived that way, where I'm waiting for this special occasion. We say, no, you're the occasion. Open up the bottle. If it's a Tuesday night, then it's Tuesday night,
So that's another myth. Champagne
That's
is
the other,
not
correct. That's exactly right. That's myth number
celebrations.
2. We're going in reverse order. That may be myth number 1, actually. You're right. You are the occasion.
I like it. Okay, so there's one last thing that I always like to talk about, because this is the EO podcast. We always talk about the top 5% and the bottom 5%. I'd love, we've talked a lot about your successes. Can you share with us, a bottom 5% that helped you in your hero's journey and what you did?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, let's go for it.
let's go there. Let's go there. So I haven't mentioned, by name what this company was that I led, with 2 other partners, and I spent 20 years building this. And it was with a fraternity brother, so a partner that I knew, more years than not in my life. And it ended, however, I still have my interest in the company, but I don't have any daily operation anymore because it was too toxic an environment. Um, from a transformation I could not tolerate any further within my partner, who had become a changed person. And this was related around, it started in 2018. It started with these conspiracy theories. It started with confusing, caustic, and cruel visions of the world, beliefs that led to expressing himself. You can do this with your own social media if you want, and that's hard enough. But he had actually taken over the company's Twitter platform and social media platforms that we were using at the time, and causing all sorts of damage to our partnerships and confusion to our employees. And I had to have conversations, not only with the employees to absorb what they were feeling and or help them navigate, but this led to some of them going in like and scrubbing our social media feeds sometimes of the drivel that was being, that was just being produced on it. And I had conversations with, his wife, spouse, crying through some of these episodes. And it was tough, but it became for my partner a new faith. And so I had seen him burn friendships as old as mine, if not even a little bit older, because their approach was to debate and to logic and to use logic and to be rational and say, how could you do this? I mean, this doesn't make sense. And I'm going to go point to point. And that just didn't work. And I saw this and I was like, well, far be it for me to take someone, if they're treating this like a faith, to put them in a corner, and label them as a, heretic or crazy. I had to, for the period that I put up with it until it was just too much for me, give this space and try to go through what I was talking about before, even before I was really cognizant of the methodology of saying, look, this is where you're excellent at, and this is where you're really, really not firing on all cylinders. Why don't we keep you focused on what you do great in the company doing, which is frankly the vision for the product, what the product must do to satisfy the needs of our users, to be the real voice of our customers, and let me handle the strategic, alliances, our partnerships, the inner culture to get the most out of our, teams. And it worked for a while until it didn't. And then it just came down to differences about how we wanted to continue the company and what direction we wanted to get to. Were we going toward a capital event? Were we not? And I just, especially at COVID, smoothed a lot of things over, right? COVID was very good. We were trading software, and when people weren't doing much except being, isolated at home, trading became a huge, extra activity, which we benefited from. But when COVID kind of melted away and we went back, we gave back a lot, and it created some frustrations. And in the end, it was time for me to, especially knowing, where the company was going to go and where it wasn't going to go, I was not going to put myself on that path any step further if it wasn't toward if the journey wasn't ending toward where I wanted it to be. And so I've had to discount the overall estimated value of the enterprise on my own personal books, because I just don't see it happening for multiple reasons. And if I'm surprised, then great. But if I'm not, I can't and will not just rely on that anymore. And I had to go through a bit of, EO, thank goodness, and the emotional intelligence and some of the methodologies and mentors. And I went through a whole, because it was my identity. How do you suddenly take the identity of being that entrepreneur in that business off and say, well, what else am I now? And now you go through these gratitude exercises. Well, I am still a father. I am still a husband. I am still, a creator of value. And I am I am an organizer and I am a leader, so let's go do those things and find the vessels to pour myself into. but it was not easy whatsoever. And it took a lot of, again, friends and mentors like Don DePani, who I met through EO, to be able to say, if your awareness is in regret, anger, and bitterness, recognize that, but move the light that's on those emotions to another area of your mind, like to gratitude and to other areas, and even to forgiveness. And
Forgiveness,
forgiveness
huge.
isn't me necessarily going to him and say, I forgive you. It's to myself, to be able to not beat myself up on, say, why didn't I see this? Why didn't I do this early? Why, what, and instead forgive myself and move on, so that, that character now just doesn't even have a voice in my mind. And when it does, it's a fleeting thought instead of a 5-minute process to wash and clean and step through it again. It is very much a fleeting thought.
Yeah, that's tough. You said there's a fraternity brother. I mean, that means you knew him in college. I mean, you knew him when you were younger, and 2 decades later, right? That is painful. And it's also it's like, how could you have prevented that, right? For him to change, right? You couldn't, right? And this is what life is all about. You can't prepare for these changes, right? That's why you have these tools like perseverance and purpose and your core values to keep you in line.
And there's even a little bit of empathy. I mean, things are not going to go well, for my partner, because if you do this to your wife, his kids are much younger than mine, so he's going through it, probably now, and in the next couple of years. But I don't, again, I don't try to dwell on it too much. It's not my circus. They're not my monkeys anymore. But there's a bit of empathy and a bit of, it's just not going to end well.
Yeah, no, I completely understand. And it's good that you're focused, right? You have to have a disciplined mind to be able to focus on the right thing. Yeah. Well,
It's a big thing about identity. And you just have to say, look, find the other hats that are as nice to wear, in your life.
yeah. And learning from it and now being able to share all that experience, because if you didn't have the experience, you wouldn't be able to help other entrepreneurs grow out of that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Anyway. Well, thank you so much for all the time that you spent with us on the podcast. And how can people get in touch with you? And I think you had mentioned your website, but if people wanted to get your wines, follow you on Instagram, how can they find you?
Thank you. Yeah. avidvines.com is the place to go and read about the champagnes, read about the producers, contact me for an itinerary, the best itinerary when you're going to Champagne. On Instagram, we're Avid with an underscore, Avid_Vines. And you can also reach my own personal one, which is David.Aferiat, Aferiat. And then certainly we can connect on LinkedIn. And when you mention you're with EO, by golly, we'll be connected.
Yes, and then maybe get on your email list in case when your book comes out, when your talk comes out.
That's right. All from avidvines.com and all from certainly LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thanks again. And I look forward to reading your book, listening to your next talk, and just seeing all the success that comes from your beautiful company.
I look forward to seeing you in Atlanta too, Kalika. Thank you for the time.
Thank you.